A specter haunts Europe. The specter of communism. All the powers of old Europe have entered into a holy alliance in order to lay this specter. Just kidding. I like buying things in video games. In a time where crafting is commonplace, searching for tiny screws in an apocalyptic wasteland is exhausting. And the simple act of grinding and looting in order to earn enough cash to buy that one piece of armor behind the counter I've always wanted isn't a feeling I can get in real life. Having shops that are usually always open, that doesn't ask me what brings you in today, and almost always have the things I need has really spoiled me for the real world. Shopping in the real world is full of people with babies, long lines, and people with babies. Video games give me at least some form of relief from that. Also, unlike shopping in the real world, my favorite shops don't go out of business unless I blow it up, like in Fallout 3. Which, while on the subject of incredibly natural transitions, Moira is underrated. I know she sends you on a series of long fetch quests involving physical pain, but as far as an introduction to the greater wasteland, Moira is perfect. Her prices are reasonable, and her main goal is to help people. Unlike the likes of Tenpenny, Moira isn't interested in recreating the old world, and is instead wanting to help humanity adapt. And while adapting may involve becoming emotionally attached to a landmine, at least it doesn't involve profiting on the destruction of someone's way of life. Eat the rich. Tenpenny first. And speaking of eating the rich, I wonder what Tanuki tastes like. Nintendo very much gets the balance between a video game shopkeeper as a character and a video game shopkeeper as a, video game shopkeeper. This is probably most prevalent in the Zelda franchise. Beetle, Happy Mask Salesman, Ravio all pale in comparison to the perfect shopkeeper in the entire series. You know, the little hopping guy behind the counter of the Kokiri shop in Ocarina of Time. No single character has made me laugh as much and cry as much as that little guy. While his actions seem funny, they're inherently rooted in the struggle of being a small business owner. His margins are so incredibly tight that while he can't afford to acquire arrows to the standards of his competitors, he can't afford a single stool to stand on so he could see over the counter. I mean, who carved that counter? None of the Kokiri are that tall. Is this some form of failed attempt at Hylian gentrification? Was this once a failed Froyo shop that Buster here decided to reuse to open up something the community could actually use? Am I looking into this too much? Also, I think that Beetle needs to wear a goddamn shirt. I'm not gonna tell the guy how he should run his business, but I think there's a reason why 7-Eleven has a no shirt, no shoes, no service policy. It's not hygiene. It brings an air of professionalism to the establishment where I buy my Slurpees. In response to that, I know what you're saying. Do they have 7-Elevens where you're from? No, they don't, but the sentiment still stands. The Happy Mask Salesman is great in Ocarina, even though he's not really selling me anything. Instead, he's creating what feels a little like a pyramid scheme. Like if he sells me a thing with the intention of me selling that thing to someone else, that's a marketing program with, multiple levels, right? That's like the textbook definition of a pyramid scheme, right? Like if it was a box full of Mary Kay and not a mask, would we even be having this conversation? Also, don't fucking shake a child, you weirdo. Ravio in A Link Between Worlds isn't a shopkeeper, and I won't be accepting arguments. He robs your corpse and squats in your house. He has no shop to keep and sells you stuff that you should be able to find in the real world. He's like a pawnbroker who's also your roommate. On a similar note, I wouldn't consider Funky Kong to be like a legitimate businessman in the same vein as Tom Nook. Funky is a little sketch, and that's reflected in his wares. A heart from an unknown source, some very suspicious potions. He's like one step above selling out of a trench coat. Which I'm not gonna complain about a little bit of help. This game is a bit brutal, but still. In the original DKC, he's not even a shopkeeper, and instead the Kong equivalent to that lady in the Living Daylights who shoots that guy through the pneumatic tube in Soviet Russia. This isn't a reference that anybody's getting, is it? Is what he's doing in Tropical Freeze better? Probably. Unlike my local Blockbuster, Funky Kong adapted with the times, as Funky Flights is 100% a product of dated game design and hardware limitations. Doesn't mean he doesn't have a slammin' tune to go along with it though. Which honestly is really important to the whole shopping experience for me. Just last week, I actually walked into a Journeys just because they were playing something off the new Turnover album. But nothing brings capitalistic glee to the front of my brain, through my ear holes, than the Sims series. There's something about the original buy mode in particular that awakens a strange nostalgia for the quintessential human shopping experience. Before a time when The Sims was actually a corporate giant, it was an auteur piece that gamified the human experience and utilized American television culture as its aesthetic. While directly rejected as a commentary on consumerism, this posh corporate semi-satirical look of The Sims makes the soft horns and MIDI violins feel ironic. Like I'm watching a 1950s TV show that really hasn't aged well.
You want to wiggle over to the stove and get my stuff.
As a youth, I think The Sims taught me that literally everything costs money, that everything is a commodity that you're buying, and that filling your house full of stuff just means your house is going to be an empty diorama of your life while you're at work staring at a computer screen longing to return. You are in a constant state of consumption, a constant state of watching your laundry pile up. You are watching meters move and your bank account go up and down. And now, as an adult, none of the conversations you have make sense anymore. You don't go out with friends because you might miss something on TV. You're washing dishes even though you have a dishwasher. You have to get up to pee the second you lay down to sleep. Your oven is on fire. You know, I can't believe I didn't start this with an incredibly obvious DLC/microtransactions joke. I mean, obviously the best video game shopping experience is paying $60 for a game only to spend more on it down the road, right? Right? Also, just a general shout out to Brock and... not Brock. While they're mostly crafters and blacksmith, the plural form of blacksmith, they also sell me things and absolutely count as profiteers in my war against gods of whatever creed. At least they finally talk to Atreus like he's actually a person though, damn. Considering how the American healthcare system has largely shifted from benefiting people who are actually sick and instead benefit the slew of pharmaceutical companies, insurance carriers, and organized medicine, it's important to talk about Pokemon centers. Did you know that in Gen 1, a single Hyper Potion costs less than $100, but in Gen 8 it costs over $250? Wow. Either Pokemon centers are profiting off of a life-saving drug for our Pokemon, or this is a war on Pokemon with lower defense stats. Oh, whoops. Just kidding, that's the price of insulin in the United States. Also, I am 1000% aware that I fudge gameplay to make a political point, and that you buy hyper potions from Pokemarts and not Poke Centers. In Gen 1 though, they use the same music, codifying that they work in tandem or something, I don't know. And when we're talking about the cold, callous hands of medical treatment, there's no other set I would rather hold my cold dead corpse than my boy Zed in Borderlands. He just seems like he'd care, like he'd be rooting around in my chest cavity trying to find my ruptured appendix long after it'd kill me, and that commitment really makes me feel good. And Marcus, regardless of what he tries to say, at least he's never tried to kill me, and always gives me a product that's somewhat reliable. He has the heart of a small businessman, an entrepreneur, and not a crazed ruler who will kill me for shits and gigs. Buddy, if we're really looking to capture the feeling of like actual shopping, you know what game captures that perfectly? Dead Rising. It's crowded. There's blood everywhere. I can't get anywhere worth a shit. The National Guard is involved for some reason, and I need to get my vaccines updated afterwards. All reason why the traditional brick and mortar store is closing down in favor of the conveniences of online shopping and 2-day delivery profiting from someone who cut... I didn't finish this joke. All right, let's do it real quick. All reason why the traditional brick and mortar store is closing down in favor of the conveniences of online shopping and 2-day delivery, profiting someone who cut benefits for their 30-plus hour employees. Am I blaming the zombie crisis in Dead Rising to the current state of modern economics and Jeff Bezos' rise to power? Well, no, I'm not. I'm not saying that. That's a weird thing to say. I'm simply saying that the time crunch and comically busy hallways of Dead Rising feels pretty in line with my holiday shopping experiences. Retail therapy is a real thing for me, and while I like doing so in video games and long for a worthwhile recreation of the mall culture I enjoy, Dead Rising seems to be an incredible microcosm of the negative aspects of modern retail shopping without all of the good. Which is honestly great for a successful zombie game, don't get me wrong, but pretty damn lame for a shopping game. Additionally, in Dead Rising 2, there's a makeshift shop pushing Zombrex at, a high price again. A life-saving drug at unreasonable prices. Do I have to pull up the insulin chart again? I'll fucking do it. You know how much it costs to get an ambulance ride? To be admitted in the hospital? How do you support that? How are nurses so underpaid, but it costs so goddamn much? It's fucking bonkers. And speaking of high prices...
I'll buy it at a high price.
I've never played Resident Evil 4. I know I probably should, like, especially for this episode, to be informed about, probably the most iconic shopkeeper in video game history. But I just haven't yet. I'm not gonna lie to you. Great memes though. Like, honestly, like, great memes. I mean, very rarely do video game shops emulate supermarkets and more big box stores. When Fallout 3 does it, it's something to loot, not something to peruse. The idea of having something quick so you can grab whatever gear you need before going back to the main gameplay loop lends itself well to simplistic menu systems, vending machines, and counter services that are so common. While there are definitely exceptions, these quick systems are most common, and while I'm not necessarily saying that they have to be like these huge realistic experiences, having some charm and having some awareness goes a long way to make me remember a shopkeeper for years to come. Giving signs of how well a shop is kept and how much power the owner has helps grow the world and potentially bring light to financial and political issues even on a relatively surface level. And while I know that's not something people want in their video games, let alone their YouTube videos about video games, it's the duty of art to comment on the era we exist in, and the absolute abysmal amount of income inequality can and should be addressed subtly. And maybe that's done by having the upper class of Rapture selling actual drugs and bombs out of vending machines to push on the now lower class to keep them docile and focused on killing each other instead of pursuing things that would actually take the power away from the select few at the top. I don't know. Shout out to the hot dog vendor in GTA 4.
What are you buying?